Can I ask you a serious question? Where are you? In front of a computer screen? In a body? In your home? In a city? On a planet? Are you in love? In pain? What is all this stuff that you see and you feel? What's it for? Where are you? And why are you there? If you really think about it, it's pretty clear that the answer to those questions holds the answer to every other possible question. And the only thing preventing us from getting the answer is the way we perceive reality. Because if we could see it for what it really is, then we would know for sure where we came from, what we are, where we're going, and why everything happens. So what is it about the way that we perceive that stops us from knowing? What's keeping us in the dark? Okay, let's start out here. This is the whole of reality. What we think of as other dimensions, non-material potential. Everything that's hidden from us, our future. What we want to feel but can't. What we want to know but don't know yet. For some reason, we have no sense of this. So to us, it's as though it doesn't exist at all. And what is all of this? Unlimited pleasure, unbounded existence, complete perception, and connection with the force that builds and guides the material universe, where we are. This is us, a closed box with 5 little openings to what surrounds us. And even though we have these 5 senses to tell us what's real and to guide us, none of them works in a way capable of sensing anything that's out here for what it actually is. The problem is, this is where we all really live. Yet we only experience what you find in there. And what you find in there is limited perception, isolation, fleeting pleasures, and all kinds of problems that cause suffering. Why don't we experience what's out here instead of what's in here? When something from the total of reality comes calling, we think we know what it is. But we never get the thing itself. It never actually enters the box, because the senses aren't really openings. What's outside the box hits some kind of resistance, a screen, a barrier, like an eardrum, or a retina, a taste bud, or a nerve that interprets what's outside, and then gives it an identity and a meaning, according to the effect that this unknown thing might have on the box. But the interpretation that the sensor gives us is entirely limited to the way it's programmed. The program doesn't tell us what the outer objective reality actually is. It reduces it, turning it into something else according to its rules. And all of our senses run on the exact same program. So whether your eye uses an electron microscope or the Hubble Space Telescope, what you'll ultimately see will always be a subjective picture, determined and controlled by the program. So what exactly is the program? It's called egoism, self-concern. How does this affect me? What do I get out of this? In other words, the will to receive. The box is a machine. The input, a formless unknown that gets processed through an inner program. And the output of the machine is our reality. But this isn't real reality. It's just the way it appears to the will to receive. Because out here, everything operates according to a different, all-encompassing program that only creates, sustains, and guides. It has absolutely no self-concern, so it has no limitations. It is unconditional altruism, the general law of the universe, the single benevolent force behind all nature and existence. It's the thing that gives you your life. This is the complete polar opposite of the box. It's like comparing the Big Bang to a black hole. It is so unlike the reason behind everything we feel, want, and do, that as long as we measure life through the 5 senses and the will to receive, we will never know our true nature, the nature of reality, or the purpose of our lives.
You know, I read a book not too long ago by a woman named Bronnie Ware down in Australia called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And she was a hospice nurse who worked with the dying people and talked to them. And the number one regret that people had, people who were dying, who knew that they were crossing over and making their transition, the top regret was, I wish I'd have had the courage to live the life that I knew I was destined to live. In other words, that I had a purpose, that I knew that there was something greater that I came here to do, that I signed up for something other than just to fit in and to go along and to follow somebody else's rules. And most of us are not, don't allow ourselves the freedom to listen to those internal callings, those things that we all feel are just so important to us.
Our lives matter. That is a very depressing, morbid picture of reality. My life matters to me. I got to convince God that it should matter to him. So maybe if I behave myself, maybe if I pray to him a lot, maybe if I sacrifice my firstborn, maybe he'll take me seriously. That is a very, very disturbing picture. It can't possibly be true. We have the opposite picture. Your life matters to God. Now try to make it matter to you too. Because if it matters to him, there must be something precious there. See if you can find what is precious about your life. And about everybody's life. About life itself. That, besides being a more Jewish concept, it's a much healthier concept. Intuitively, it feels better. It feels right. We don't have to convince the Creator who created life that my life matters. And if I do have to convince him, I'm in big trouble. The whole thing is upside down. It makes no sense. And yet, in many ways, that's what religion seems to be saying. God doesn't find you important. You don't matter to him unless you do something to get his attention. That's disturbing and disturbed. So let's examine for a moment. What does it mean life matters? What does that mean? Matters for what? For whom? To whom? And if you have to convince people that life matters, what are people thinking? If this is a discussion, if this is a debate, if this is something that needs to be resolved, we're in bad shape. So we used to speak about the sanctity of life. Now we're saying life matters.
So the biggest misunderstanding about how this whole system works is that we tend to think of it as a justice system, a criminal justice system, in which actions that we do towards other people, even thoughts that we have, are balanced out by a heavenly court in which nobody gets away with anything and everything, always comes back no matter what you do. Now, it's not a criminal justice system, and it's not based on the good and bad that we think about. It's based on the good and bad according to the principle by which everything was created. There's no punishment involved in this system. The concept of karma, the popular one, says if you make somebody suffer, then you will suffer. But the system itself is much greater and much more loving than that very small conception of good and bad. Suffering is not a punishment. Suffering is a correction in the sense that it aims us better at the target. Like when you shoot a missile, it never goes straight and directly to that target without any deviation, without any mistake. It's constantly in mistake. It's constantly off the correct course. And the guidance system will tap it this way or that way, this way or that way, and it's constantly out of alignment with its correct course until it reaches its target. The same with us. Remember, this is in a matrix of love, and we're built according to our desires and the responses that we have in the sensations around our desires. So it always speaks to us that way because that's the type of creature that we are. The sensations that we call suffering or inner pain, that's the currency of the relationship that we have with the upper force. It's not the external things that happen to us. It's that set of responses, of desires and frustrations about the desires, a sense of being lifted up and being in a positive space or feeling shame. That's the matter out of which our development evolves. It's not to say that there aren't external sufferings, or at least there appear to be. But given the context of the intended goal, those are truly of no matter in the overall system. And in fact, if we respond correctly to the system, we don't experience those things externally at all. We experience all of the corrections internally.
I think probably the most important thing about being inspired is to understand what the word inspired means. If you break it down, it's in spirit. And it's like a recognition. I think the most significant thing about it is that you begin to realize that who I am is not a human being here having a spiritual experience, but it's really the reverse. That who I am is a spiritual being, an infinite spiritual, invisible being, having a temporary human experience.
Right.
And the key to living an inspired life is to always come from that place. In Excuses Be Gone, in a recent book of mine, I talk about living from a place of awareness. Mm-hmm. And awareness is thinking like God thinks. Like we all come from a source, every single one of us, and we all return to that source. Mm-hmm. You know, T.S. Eliot said, "We shall not cease from exploration, but at the end of all of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we originated and to know it for the first time." And he was speaking about death. You know, it's like ultimately you're going to return to the place from which you originated. I take that to mean that if you return to the place from which you originated, you don't have to die to experience that.
Yeah.
You can live in spirit. And when you see yourself as a spiritual being, having a temporary human experience,
everything is ongoing.
Everything shifts, everything changes for you, and you begin to recognize that there's absolutely nothing that you can't do. I mean, in the New Testament, there's a wonderful line of Jesus. He says, with God, with Source, with Spirit, however you want to call it, all things are possible. Mm-hmm. And I always ask an audience, what does that leave out? You know, that all things are possible literally means all things are possible. So whatever it is you'd like to attract into your life, whatever you'd like to accomplish, whatever you'd like to do in your life, if you start from a spiritual place, a place of all things are possible, if I return, you know, and get to that place, and then I begin to visualize it, and I begin to use my imagination, because everything that we see around us, everything in this world, was once imagined. Everything, you know, that camera that is there, the clothes that you're wearing, the chairs that we're sitting on, everything once had to be imagined. If you get that, I mean, Einstein's famous observation was that, you know, imagination is more important than knowledge. If you can learn how important your imagination is, and that's where your spirit is, in that place, and then once you go to that place, in what it is you'd like to attract into your life, you're coming from a spiritual place, absolutely nothing is impossible.
Yeah.